On to part 3 of our New Year's miniseries, The Founders of Cropster. In the last part of this miniseries, the founding crew gets together to discuss what their founding story means to them and the experience of starting a company with 3 co-founders in Colombia, the US, and Austria. Get ready to listen to another wild adventure in coffee. Cheers. Yo, what's going on, guys? I'm stoked to be here with you guys. We have all 3 co-founders of Cropster here, and this is going to be super, super exciting. Welcome everybody together. How's it going?
Wonderful. Yeah, thanks, Nick, for setting this up.
Thanks, Nick. Cool to be here. Yep. Great to be back.
Yes, sir. This is gonna be dope. I'm excited. All right, so this is now the I would say the finale of our little mini series of the Cropster co-founders, we've learned about Norbert, Andreas, and Martin. And today I kind of want to just have you all together and really discuss the founding of Cropster as a whole, and then go into some other business topics that having you 3 together. But I think what would be really cool to start off with is you guys kind of giving me your perspective, your experiences now together of just at the beginnings of Cropster, and specifically the dynamic between you 3 of how and why it all started in Colombia, and what was it like you 3 being together, starting it in Colombia. It's a fascinating story, I'm sure.
Who starts?
Andreas, you start.
Okay, I start. For me, Colombia was a very special place and time. I think what really helped us is we all 3 were quite free at the time. So we had nothing that tied us to a specific thing or place in the world. We had the luxury of trying stuff. We all had our master's degree in IT, so getting a job wasn't really a big problem. And we all had that social motivation and value set that we want to do something meaningful and create impact. And then all the 3 of us, we worked in SIAT, that Agriculture Research Center. And that was a very special place for me. At the time, I think 1,500 people worked there, and many with PhDs and masters and whatnot, with different professions. And what's more important is they came from various places in the world to do research something agriculturally with plants, genetics, which is about something with impact, right? Like nourishing the world. So you have a lot of people at a specific place and time, and they have their ideas and they're very motivated. That's why they actually are there. Nobody just walks by and works there. Basically, they all had to be determined to be there. And that's a very fascinating environment, because people think about ideas. They think about how we do that, how we change things, what's the consequence and sustainability in it. And that's just it's a fast rotating kernel where ideas go around and are approved or not approved, and then changed and modified. And I think that was a spirit that allowed us to think, or allowed me to think out of the box, which I learned in my life before. And I could see different solutions. I could see different questions that I actually never asked myself. And that gave me a different perspective, and different realizations, basically, what's doable. Maybe that's really, I could see things suddenly, I could do that, actually. That's something you can think and do. And I think this whole thing, that society we had, allowed us to think about Cropster and talk about it really early on, when it was just a very crazy idea. And people approved of it. They said, that's cool. Let's see what's happened. Okay, they also made jokes about us. But overall, yeah, there is actually good jokes about it. But I think that was the environment, and that's the positive feedback we got initially.
Yeah, I think it was a very, very nurturing environment. Very, very exciting. And what I took from that time back then was anything was possible, and anything you would do would make a difference. So there was very little done in that area where we started working. IT and agricultural research and developing countries was just a field. There was not so much investment or anything happening yet. So it was a little bit the blank slate, and you could really do a lot. But that also made it so complex to find what is the right thing, what will stick. And that's why it took us a while to figure out what is exactly what we should do, what we should not do, and how we should approach it. But from
Mm.
the feeling was pure excitement. I think it must be the feeling when the gold diggers came out to California and it's like, oh, anything goes, right?
Yeah.
And that's how it felt a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do agree. I mean, it's just like being around very intelligent people is a very cool thing, and people that they're not looking down on you coming up with crazy ideas, right? Because it's just like sounds reasonable. I have no idea, but I have 2 PhDs, and then it's like, well, okay. I mean, we don't do the same thing, but I regard you as a smart person, and it was like you still give me your time that I can explain to you what we think is important, and that is incredible, and we sometimes forget how nice or like this feeling or environment is, or how important it is to listen to people, especially if you've done something for a long period of time, and then you you still share this like same like attitude. That was really great, and I also think like this. Yeah, Andreas said like I mean being in Colombia, and I mean back then I just finished my degree, so money was. I mean, I was paid in food, if I remember correctly,
That's
food and
right.
shelter, and and still still this was possible. I mean, this is there is I could live somewhere, and I didn't have a job, anything left that I could like rely on. I mean, not much, but it was still enough to be there, and still feeling not like every corner that I turn, this is the last decision that we can make, and that gives you, of course, some freedom to iterate and to also um, be more flexible in your ideas and start with crazy thoughts and explore them. So yeah.
Yeah. No, that's dope. I mean, for me, it's just so fascinating knowing that Cropster has a heart and be like a founding in Colombia, basically. Obviously, for me, because I spent a lot of time there as well. But it's also interesting because, I mean, there's really humble beginnings in Cropster. I mean, from my understanding, Cropster decided to take a slow, organic approach to the growth of the company. I've heard Norbert tell me stories about, just really living on like a few dollars a day and trying to make it work. I mean, I want to know a little bit more about that, like knowing like how uh financially limited you were in the beginning to where it is now. Like, how did you get through those financially difficult times together? I mean, Martin just told me he literally lived on food and shelter for work. So
Yeah,
it's
you
like
know,
crazy, it's
it is crazy when you discuss this maybe here in the US or in the high price area of San Francisco or so.
mm,
But it's not
mm-hmm,
that crazy when you live in a humble country where you can actually live and eat and have some fun on a very limited budget. So I think that helped us because you could,
mm,
you take $10 and you have, that's what you need for an evening going out. You can always spend more, but it's also okay to just do it on a budget.
yeah,
And it was never about the money, and that was the interesting thing. It was always about the idea. So we were driven by the idea more than driven by how can we make money. It was always
mm,
important to have a business model and to create a sustainable business model because that's part of the, I would say, the adventure and the strategy and what we wanted to achieve, right? So doing a lot of work in research projects and developing projects where budgets move very quickly and topics change very quickly. We wanted to do something sustainable,
Mm.
but we didn't know how. So that took us a while. But we were so obsessed, and I still remember that it was not that important to. First of all, we were working so much. How would we spend money? We didn't have time for that, right? What
Yeah.
we really needed was food and a roof over our heads, and we needed some operations budget to fly or travel around. That was probably one of the bigger items in the beginning.
Mm.
But we also did not want to sell the idea out to someone who would put us under enormous financial pressure immediately. So that was also important. It's like, no, we want to keep control, and we want to do this like a little bit on our terms. And again, not easy, and it was a long time, I mean, years, years.
Yeah.
We got great advice where people told us like, hey, you gotta be mindful of not going into the gambling too far. So it's like a night on a roulette table where you lose, you play again, you lose, you play again, you lose, you play again, because eventually you will win, but eventually might never come. It's the same when you start a company, right? You try an idea, it kind of works, but not really. Then you modify it, not yet, and so on. So how long are you trying? And when are you starting to cut your losses and walk away? And that was definitely an idea or a thought which always a company does. Too much talk, Martin.
Yeah, no. For me, when I think about it, it's like Cropster is this overnight success, 15 years in the making. It's like this. You see the end result, right? You see what
Yeah.
came out of it, and it's like if you reflect on it, it's like there's a lot of good stories and a lot of fun. There was also a lot of hard time, although because you still need to progress, right? And we did a lot of things. We tried out a lot of things to do something, because as ultimately I do believe that not taking venture money, not that it was possible in the time being, 2008 financial crisis, you doing something with farmers, not a great selling point. But anyhow, it always kept us to to look forward and see like, okay, what actually works. If someone just gives you money and say like, okay, build your dream house, I mean in our case, or build your dream application, yeah, you might miss the boat, because what you build and what you think is not always that what people need. And you build something, and we have built so many things. I mean we have built so many applications. That's a completely different story. And but also within our first version that we built, it was like it's like we tried things out, we listened to people. It didn't resonate, then we cut it out, then we tried something new. If this worked, then we tried this and this. So it was a motivation to go forward, to actually find something that sticks and that makes people actually want to give you money for it, because that wasn't always clear either. And so yeah, I think that was this all played into our strengths. I mean, but yeah, the very initial things. I mean, we split things up. So I we didn't have like three incomes. We had, I mean, I had none. I had food and shelter. There was Norbert, who actually had still a job in Seat, but he only did 50% to invest the other 50% into our company. And Andreas, well, and I, we split development work, although we always tried to do like projects with like research centers to build a basis for the project that we had actually wanted to do. But sometimes we had to do just like random projects to make a little bit of money, which back then seemed a lot of money, because if someone told us like, hey, we give you 10,000 to build this completely unrelated system, we would say, yeah, that sounds great. We would do it, and we would reinvest the 10,000 into the other time into our company. So it was like really trying to make it work. And yeah, it was like, it was long, but fun.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, yeah, I think most founding stories have a roller coaster factor in it, and for us, I think the founding period and years, cross-financing, the whole thing with doing other projects and selling software, was a big part of the roller coaster for us. Still, we continuously progressed that thing, and I remember a scene when we were on the World of Coffee in Vienna, and we were on the trade show the whole day. It was our first European trade show, showing roast, and we were equipping the World Championship. They did a pre-run of the Roast World Championship, an unofficial one. That went all well, but at the side we had projects, and I remember we went to the show and went out with a few customers, and then back to the hotel. And Martin, actually, in that case, he did fix that specific project we did, I think, in South Colombia, because we had to ship something and it didn't work. And we had those days, and we had to do it. But so that was our approach. And at a specific time, I think in 2013, we said, that's the end. We skip all those projects, no more of those, see where we can get out, see how we do complete the ones that we do, because we wanted to fulfill what we promise. And we decided to switch to to our existing software as a service business. And we basically pivoted 100% in our revenue at that point, because we had super tiny revenue from the SaaS and we had relatively high revenue from the projects. And we just said, okay, kill revenue source number one and full focus on source number two and see how it goes. And we went full in. We said, we do this now, and this has to work now, and this is what we want to do. And it really worked out. That year became so crazy. We were on Sky in Portland, and people coming to our booth and they came repeatedly back and brought other people, look at this, look at that. And then he asked us, can I buy it here? And say, no, we send you an invoice, because we couldn't accept cards on the booth. and then he brought other people. And then one guy said, yeah, give me 10 data bridges. I will need to spread that with my friends, among my friends. And that actually happened, by the way. And that was just crazy. We were on the booth the whole day. We couldn't leave the booth, like literally not a single minute, because there were people queuing, and we had a 9 to 9 feet booth, right? Or is it 10? I don't remember, but
10 by 10, maybe.
Yeah, the smallest thing you can get. And that was just crazy. And after that, we were setting up customers in Roast and sending out probes and data bridges and connecting that and setting up accounts and training people, getting up early in the morning in Europe to help Australians with their setup, and so forth. So that just created a lot of momentum, and at that point we went forward with that. But I think if you could split up the history of our company, that's the phase till that 2013 point where everything changed for us.
And prior to that, I mean, you're talking about the nonprofit, right? Because I think you mentioned, or Norbert mentioned, you started as a nonprofit actually as the project.
Not necessarily. So we the first internet domain, and that's a good story too, was cropster.org. Because when it took us about a week or even more to find a good name, because we wanted a really good name. And I know we thought it will be done in the afternoon. So we sat down in that afternoon. We didn't find a good name. So we reconvened until one day well, after about a week or so, we found Cropster. Cropster is awesome. Let's do it. And yes, it's available. So we reserved domain name cropster.org. That was in May 2007. And we felt really accomplished back then. And then we thought, well, we don't want to be like a .com. .com is so, like, everybody's a .com. But
Exactly.
we are like an organization. We're bigger than that, right? We still had a clear, like, we want to do this under a sustainable business model.
Mm.
So it's not an NGO or anything. But yeah, Martin.
No, it's just like I think like so many things over the years fade away, but that moment is so stuck in my head. It's like the moment of like, that's the name. Someone, Norbert's running up, getting a credit card and saying, we are buying it. We bought the domain, and at this moment, it felt like this was like, I mean, it's done. I mean, we did it, and it's, we did like the whole
You made
photo
it.
session. We have this like photos of like the founding moment, and yeah, actually, it wasn't done. Turned out.
Finding a name is a pretty big step
Oh
in
yeah,
any
no, it's
business.
almost what you need. And just like continuing on the domain thing, because at one point, yeah, we started as this bigger org. At one point, after some research, we also thought like, well, getting the .com is not a bad idea because it's like you should own the .com. And we looked it up, and it was taken. Was taken by a bike shop in the UK, I guess. And it was like, well, some bike shop. They never put like a domain. I mean, they never finished the website, and it's not like, yeah, they are going under, right? They must. We can get this, and we set like a timer for like, okay, when would this domain end? And and then we contact. Well, again, Norbert contacted them. And I forgot what was the initial offer, Norbert?
So I sent an email to that guy and said, hey, what's with that domain? Are you interested in selling? And he said, yeah, it's for sale, and it's $120. And I got back to him and was like, 120, that's outrageous. We can do that, but I can give you 80, I think, or 70, 80 or something. And he got back and was like, okay. And and yeah, that's how we got the .com domain, which we ignorantly did not buy when we got the .org, because we could have gotten both at the same time, but we didn't. So
That's funny you say that, because recently, like on my Instagram feed, the story of how Elon Musk got the Tesla name is being like going around. So it reminds me of that, where like he literally sent a sales guy to the person's doorstep to be like, beg until he decided to let go of the of the name so Tesla could have it. So it's just, yeah, it's a funny, interesting story. Enjoying this episode of the Coffee and Technology Podcast? This podcast would not be possible without the support of Cropster. Whether it's tracking your harvest yields, roastery and inventory management, or simply tracking brew recipes, Cropster Origin, Cropster Roast, and Cropster Cafe can help streamline your workflows and help you operate more efficiently. So I want to dig a little deeper into each of you personally, though, and figure out, so okay, so you've all Andreas and Norbert have mentioned they're very Austrian when it comes to the money part, being conscious of spending, and I can tell you that's not an American thing. I know that's not an American thing. And I want to know where a lot of this come from, because a lot of tech companies these days, they go straight to VCs and they're like, give me all the money you can, let's make it happen. And a part of that is because I can see how hard it is to have a sales project. You got to fund it in some way, whether it is financially or emotionally or whatever it is. And I want to know, is that just like literally in by you guys going this like this route of being conscious of the money and spending and whatnot? Is that something you just developed over time when you started the business? Is that something you grew up thinking about, or is that literally just the Austrian in you saying, nah, got to think about this? I mean, what is it about you three having that engraved into your head?
I think there is a few aspects. Initially, when we started out, we talked to some investors, but it was the financial crisis, and yeah, we were on the risk side of projects at that time. So that's the reason we pursued basically the other option to cross finance with other projects and stuff that we sell. Later on, so today I think I get contacted by a VC every 2 weeks.
Whoa.
And that's going on for the last 2 years.
Okay.
And I think we have this large plan that we want to do to leverage the whole supply chain and work with everybody. And we just learned in our initial phase of the company, we can't pull that off in 2 years. That's just a multi-year project. And we did one investment round actually with Cropster, and we were looking for a very specific profile. So it needed to be somebody who can leave the money in long term, or even forever, who wants to stay on very long. The other thing is we were looking for people with a specific expertise who can help us in international business, but more specifically in coffee. Because we felt that gives us a good consulting internally, and that gives us a pool of money, and we can spend it in a way and build up our products and services continuously. And we wanted somebody who can understand that. And that's not a general thing. I think going with VC has a lot of benefits, actually. And that's still something for further growth that could be interesting. But I think in the history, how we came out, that was just not very compatible, how their business works and how our worked. And overall, looking back, I'm very, very happy that we went the way that we did. Although it was hard sometimes, but in reality, we had a few years where we could trial and error stuff. If we would have run with our plan A, B, and C, we would have spent the money, and after 2 years, we wouldn't have a business model, probably, because we tested those out. I think we just gave us enough time to try enough things to make something work in the area of vision that we wanted to do. And a traditional VC wouldn't have allowed for that for us.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I guess there's also other elements, as you were saying, the upbringing, our background. And I would say it's probably more our IT background. That's what we know best. And back when we started, that was the most important thing. Plus our knowledge of coffee and our connections with the coffee supply chain. But the finance. Let's say that the finance aspects were not our strong suit when we got started. So we didn't even really know how to calculate evaluations or how to do that. We knew how to live day by day. We knew how to organize our budget, stay compliant, all those things, not a problem. But more from a personal experience, you spend when you have, and not you spend because you get it somewhere and later on it will all work out. And I think that's more like the dealing with that was definitely difficult for us in the beginning. We did it a little bit, but only very controlled and only within like family members. So we never sold anything outside or gave anything away in the beginning. I think it's cool, and that was very weird when I arrived here in the US. A few years later, so 2012, we incorporated in here. A few years later, we talked to people in the finance industry, especially in Silicon Valley and so on. They all like, yeah, what's your? I mean, they asked me all those terms and those questions, and it's like, well, I don't know how to say that, but we sell, then money comes in, and then we spend. It's like, that's called cash flow finance. Like, that's exactly what we do. Okay. But of course, that's not what a VC does. That's not what investors do, right?
Yeah,
They lend you money for a specific reason.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I do, yeah, as I mean, there's many aspects to all of it, and partially definitely what you grow up with and what you know. I also think like the climate changed a lot when we started to now
Mhm,
where it is now. In two ways, I mean, there was 2000, then there was a boom, then was 2008, the boom, but and now I think it's like even at least in certain sizes, it's like being cash flow financed is not a bad thing anymore. As it was like, oh, bad. It was not bad back then, but it was also not like common or like in like in the US. In Europe, it's very common. I mean, it's like this is what you do as a European because you're really more risk averse, and you're really. I mean, I cannot speak for all European. This is probably too far out. But in general, you are more like I mean, as I know it, or like my bubble works like this, and we all know from people around us and how they work, and that of course gives you some way of of dealing with those things, and I think there's no real one reason. And yeah, it just all came together. I mean, it came together that there was certain outside factors that were out of our control. We had some internal compass that we wanted to follow. We were also able to live in an environment that permitted it. So I
Mm,
think you can never say like, okay, follow the Cropster steps and it will be
mhm.
success, because I think that's impossible. It's a time, a place, and everything just like working together to provide a certain opportunities for this moment, and this is how it just like um, was for us, I guess.
Yeah, it would be hard to write a handbook, and I think that would not be very successful for anybody. And I also link it still a little bit back to the mission, right? We really wanted to do this. So we wanted to do this more than anything else. We wanted to make it happen. And um, playing the longer game was a benefit in that aspect. It would
mm,
have been really devastating to get a lender or an investor on board and then be shut down after 2 years. We
mm,
wanted to play that game out. And if that game needed more than 2 years, we wanted to have that time. And we felt a certain threat that would not be allowed.
yeah,
So that's why you can always say that it's risk averse, but it's also because we really wanted to dig into that and see what's possible.
yeah,
And now you see what's possible, and I think there's way more possible even. And for next steps, maybe there is other options, but for now we're doing very well the way it's set up, and we grow. It's the other question was then also like, can you hire 200 people within 3 months? Like, no, that's not how we are. We're not set up that way. That destroys the idea, right? So
yeah,
if you're a mission driven company, you want to make sure that everybody gets the mission,
mm,
and that needs time. that's
mhm,
that's that's a one-on-one that we invest a lot of time and energy into the value statements and mission and those things. So it's not just on paper and in an Excel sheet. You can calculate a lot of things which then in the real world don't pan out. And I think for some other companies it works very well is if their I think environment is less complex maybe, or what they do is less complex. It's easier to communicate. I don't know. Maybe it's all excuses I'm saying here, but I think it's just our way in the end of the day.
No, I think Norbert, you brought up a very good point, and it's people, and just like if you go through that, just I mean, even the thought kills me to think like you hire 200 people, no matter how many people, and on a whim you have to let them go because oh yeah, the
mm,
spreadsheet doesn't work
Mhm.
out. I mean, it's like what kind of like this is, I mean, I don't want to do this. This is not how I want to work somewhere. And nor should anyone else. And I mean, it's like, and there is these things out there, but it's not, that's not us. And therefore this is like also, so we can, there is a certain need to grow organically to actually get to the point where we are, because it's like that's always how we worked. And yeah, I think it circles back, and like for our setup, for our values, that's the one right way to do it, and therefore the one that we chose.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's super nice, and I think this is a good segue to kind of shift gears a little bit too, though, um, and talking about now you three now having the established business 15 or so years later, 10, 15 years later. So for a little bit of context, Andreas and Martin are in Innsbruck, Austria. Norbert, you're in the States. What, on a higher level, what's the dynamic now between you three today of running a global business with you being in two different parts of the world, having employees in not only two parts of the world, but multiple parts of the world? What's the dynamic like, and where does the trust lie when it comes to, the tech side, the tech decision, the finance decision, the strategy decisions? You know, what is it like between you three?
I think it has evolved over time, and it will evolve more. We The key is communication. We have talked, I don't know how many hours and days and years when we sum it up. We have taken all kinds of decisions together, from very micro. Is the logo a little bit too green or too, how does a certain text need to be written? What's the product decision? So we've worked ourselves through many stages of the company, and we finally arrived at a very manageable. So through that work we did together, we know each other very well. We know how everybody kind of feels and thinks. We also have developed that really intrinsic and very deep trust. So that allows us now to go more into our roles and say, hey, I do this, you do that, you do that. And we still have our weekly management calls where we all come together, we talk things through. And sometimes it's a very straightforward 5 minutes, you inform about the thing you do, great. And sometimes it takes more because we feel like we're not fully aligned, or something is forgotten, or something can be done better. Because we're always striving to find the best solution, not just the quickest. And that keeps us engaged and interested. That keeps us together, at least from my perspective. So
I think our asset is that we have similar values. That's what also helped us to start Cropster initially. On the other side, we have different approaches how we do things. Also, what we like to do, actually, that's also not the same. And over time, we had to learn that, or I had to learn it. That's not. But the trust level is here because of the values. That's why I'm very happy to trust each of those. If they say they do that, I know they would do it in a specific value frame also. So it will not be a crazy result to me. It might not work, but it won't be a crazy result. I don't anticipate. And they would do it in a way I would never do it. And that's also cool because that doesn't matter. I think that helps us. And that also helps us to find common ground. I think our approaches to work will lead us to different perspectives, and somehow we need to get that together. And I think that's our strong suit, that we can do that. And that we repeatedly do it, and we did it over years. Although we changed and our company changed, and also our roles changed a lot. I think we were most affected by changing roles over time. I programmed still parts of the backbone and other things that still exist somehow. but they're going away bit by bit, and it's very long. But we did all that, and still we ran a company at the same time, right? So we had a lot of that perspective, also working in sales with customers and support and all of that thing, all those roles and departments. We as a collective worked through all of those actually over the years, and then we span it out and created it.
Yeah, and I think something, I mean, the formative first years where we actually lived in the same space, I mean, that also gives you, I mean, you, as sometimes it's said, it's like having a company is like being in a relationship. It's like you, well, actually they say marriage, but I don't have any ideas about that. But you're in this relationship. Yeah, I don't know about marriage. So, but follow me here. So it's like it's the same thing, right? You have to know someone else, and you if you stick together, and we went into this after we already worked together for a few months. We shared the same house. We actually lived together, and we had, this was Andreas said, like we had an understanding of values. So it's like it was not like this person is completely outside of what I value, and that gave us the framework for building trust, and then it's like the first few years we then went from being like in Colombia to being like a multinational, with Norbert being in the US, me sitting in Colombia, and Andreas being in Austria. So we only shared a few hours on a time zone. We had to make these decisions how we want to go forward, even with like not so much time. And that I mean, now I'm back in Austria where Andreas is, but it's like we had this time where we were already very close, then separated, and now I mean partially close, but it's you over the years you just like you learn how people are, you trust, you learn, and hopefully, I mean, it depends on everyone, but hopefully you can learn to trust into people, because this is really it's the backbone of everything. I mean, I can blindly trust in decisions that are made. As Andreas said, would I do it sometimes differently? Yes, but does it matter? Not really, because it's like it isn't. I know certain things, and I think also over those years, having 3 people was very important to me. Because you go through phases. You go through this, like, we buy a domain and world is great, to a moment where we're like, okay, we ditch our entire plan and do something else with no revenue at all, or like very low revenue. And in between, you have all this, like, a project works out. You're waiting for a project, that the project cancels. Now your entire business, so like the entire cash flow that you have assumed will come in, is currently gone. And it's like, and people, when you crash, and you like, this is not working, and someone else is coming in and saying, no, this is working. I'm pretty sure it's working, and someone can pick it up again. And it's like you can go through this, and it's like, if you do it alone, my biggest respect for everyone who is doing it on their own, because it's like it's a very much an emotional roller coaster, and then but having this and really knowing at this point, I'm really feeling low, but there's 2 people that will run it, then you can just like blank out, okay, go off, reset, come back, and keep going. So that's one of the great things of like having this like relationship that we have formed over those years.
Yeah, that's actually a good point to having to, because I know a lot of times I hear, having 3 co-founders or more than 2 or 3 co-founders is always kind of sometimes risky, but I think that was a good point right there. It's like it's got a lot of benefit to it. Obviously, you've proven it. You all 3 have proven it through Cropster. And that kind of leads me to my next point, though, is so trust and communication amongst you 3 has been one of like a grounding aspect to the success of the company. Now, how does that translate now, that trust and that trust between you three and communication between you three into creating a strong company culture? Because now it's not just 3 people, it's over 50 people or 60 people or worldwide, however, I don't know how the number now. But now you have to account for a company culture of 60 people versus before. So how does that work out to be in that regard?
I would I would say similar to what we have started and how we developed. Right, we developed our communication and our trust level, and that's what we do with our employees. Everybody has to take their own decisions, but there's also the request for communication. It's like, why do you do this? What's the thought behind that? It's okay to fail. But it's definitely necessary to think about stuff and plan and align, right? And I think that's the same as we act. Basically, we align, we plan, and then we place trust in that it will turn out well. And I think
Mhm.
over time, we do have a good number of employees with us for a very long time.
Mm.
Basically, yeah. And then that's you go through those patches, right?
Mhm.
Of it goes all well and it's awesome, and everybody, especially when you're successful, everybody's successful. And then there's times where it's hard, and you need to restructure, and you need to cut and change, and that is never easy for anybody, even if it's not meaning a pay cut. If it means change in role or a change in an idea we had, but as a team we can figure it out. And I think that's, to me, always the biggest joy when I
Mm.
see I can go away, especially like going away on vacation. To me, that's fantastic. I go away on vacation, I come back a week later, and I see everything still runs, right? Nothing broke. That's awesome.
Because of it.
And it's not, yeah. Now as we grow, certain fields I cannot be involved anymore. And then I just read the reports, or I go into a meeting and I see how well everything is already organized and structured. That's a
Mm.
big joy to see that. But it takes time, doesn't come overnight, and it takes engagement. So same as the investment in us three, that was also an investment. It's not automatic. That's like, oh yeah, those 3 people just. No, we also we are already very aligned on our values, and we knew each other partly, and over time more and more. But there's a constant alignment process, and we need to take the time. We need to take, and that's the investment. We need to take the
Mm.
time. A good friend of mine in Colombia said once about marriage. He said, take 1 hour a day, and that's what he did for his last 50 years of marriage. Like, I take from 5 to 6, independent if their kids were little, independent if they were job, except he was traveling. But otherwise, he was sitting with his wife for 1 hour talking. I said, that's the key to him. And I thought that's
Mm.
very, very wise. It's not necessarily that I can do it every day, but it's an amazing concept.
Mm.
And for our company, sitting in our constant management meetings and making the time to talk and review is important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean the thing is, like, as Norbert said, I mean, we have some people that are with us since a very long time, but others joined recently. So as Andreas pointed out, I mean, Cropster 2 phase 2 started like 2013 around, so it's not as long as Cropster existed. So there's a lot of things that like happened over the last 5-6 years, and we some of those things that we are now went through is like for 15 or like something years. Yeah, I think 2006 is when I came to Colombia, so 15 years. And this is like, I mean, those things need time to form, and now we sometimes need to do it like faster, and building like, and this is where also more of this, like, more investment comes in. Like, we need to invest into this because we need to build this like trust level that we have built and that we often expect from each other and we see in each other, because it's like, of course Norbert will do this, because I mean, I don't have to think about it. I was like, yeah, Andreas's thoughts, I can hear him when I propose this, that he will say that's a stupid idea, and I will ignore it. But this is like,
I do the same.
yeah, of course. I mean, and we just know this, and sometimes you go into this and you see people that recently, I mean, they are not been with us for so long that there's like more doubt. I mean, you come someone in, it's like, can I trust this person? I was like, and that is what we need to just like really try to distill and help people to understand. It's like everyone who is working at Cropster is a very passionate person. And this is a great thing, but passion also comes with a lot of like, yeah, that needs to work, right? And this is, I want to do this. And like, if you are not 100% committed, or I have the feeling you are not 100% committed, you are threatening my passion. And it's like, not the passion, but the project that I'm so behind. And therefore, this is like, this can lead to, of course, like conflict sometimes. It's like, oh no, you're disagreeing. But you see, and we see this, I mean, how this has changed also over the years now that we are more, but it's like, once this becomes like, this trust is formed, once this communication is there, you can do insane things. You can build things that you could never do alone. Because if you're alone, you're just like, okay, I'm the do-it-all, and it will look mediocre, and it will maybe work great because that's where my specialty is in, but I cannot sell it because I have no understanding of sales, right? And this is like, all those parts needs to play together to actually do something big. And yeah, I think this is the most important thing, is like having a culture where this can foster, and also hooks back a little bit to this, like, firing people is not our thing, because it's like, you need time, and people need time, and then they can develop. So that's a little bit of an excursus in this direction.
But I agree. I think we are a very passionate and mission-driven company, and we project our mission into our products. So the stakes are high for everyone and their work. I think that's our energy source, and sometimes the energy is high. And then things move, right? And sometimes you have even small things really touch your vision, touch your passion, and we have to fight it out. We have to find a solution. But that also means nobody goes home after work and say, "Well, I don't care." Even if it doesn't work, I don't care. It's just a job. I really believe that's not the company we want to be, but it's also not the people that work here that think like that.
Yeah.
And that is cool. That is cool. And if you have the luxury in the world to go to a place to work where that's happening, you very likely do something meaningful and impactful and great in a good quality. And that is very nice. That's really, for me, that gives purpose. And I'm very grateful that we have that.
Yes. I love it.
You can't say anything else, Nick.
No, beautiful story, guys. Thank you so much for the work you've done and the work you continue to do. I love listening to your experiences and stories and everything in between. It's amazing. Thank you guys so much for this.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Nick. It's awesome talking to you. Yeah. Thanks for organizing all this.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Coffee and Technology Podcast. To learn more about Cropster, subscribe to this podcast and be sure to follow us on social media. And for more educational content, be sure to visit cropster.com/learn.